Our present series is to be concerned with a study of pressure as we experience it in daily living and a search for remedy, with particular reference to the development of Zen philosophy in China and Japan. One of the interesting symbolisms of Zen is the construction and arrangement of the principal temples of this sect. The Zen sanctuary is usually a comparatively simple structure. Very little ornamentation, very few religious symbols. The entire temple is oriented in terms of its meditation gardens. These may be one or several. They will be hedged or walled enclosures, each a world to itself, each a retreat against confusion, and each so carefully and wonderfully contrived as to give the impression that it is merely nature reaffirming itself, restating its own influence in the life of the individual. The therapy of the Zen garden lies in its contribution to man's acceptance of life itself. The man should change his point of view from a desperate struggle to a quiet realization or recognition of essential value. The Zen garden, therefore, retires from human involvement. Man experiences the garden only as an observer. He finds between himself and this sanctuary no interference, no involvement in the fashion of man-made things. The garden itself is so beautifully put together that there is no visible indication of human handiwork. It is simply nature recognized as something of extraordinary beauty. It is as though we looked out through a window to a magnificent scene created by a power infinitely greater than ourselves. This type of garden is very well known not only to the mystics of Asia, but to persons in every walk of life. You may find children making a pilgrimage to such gardens after school, not because they are told to, but because it represents an interlude which they have experienced as important to themselves. Young people, older persons, parents, grandparents, simply come and sit for a little while in this garden for purposes of reorientation, in an effort to discover relationship with life, a relationship which is lost because of the illusion and confusion resulting from living forever in a man-made environment. Man-made things move in upon us until we almost come to believe that we live in a man-made universe. And if this peculiar delusion actually controls us, suddenly the meaning of life is destroyed. Life has to have sureties, values, facts, truths that are larger than the contrivances of men. If these larger facts are not available to us as vast forms and patterns of strength, we suddenly find ourselves extremely weak. We have no support, no strength, no reserve against pressure. So the Zen garden represents an area that is without pressure. something to be experienced and to be accepted without even creedal considerations. You do not have to believe anything in order to enjoy the garden. All you need to experience is the need for that garden. Today in our Western way of life, we are all experiencing need. Need for some type of internal quietude. Unfortunately, we do not all have Zen gardens available to us. Nor would we probably choose to attend them even if they did exist. We have a different attitude on these matters. Yet regardless of our attitudes, we are the victims of the one common difficulty which is experienced today entirely over the surface of the earth, and that is pressure. So for the next few Wednesday evenings, we want to study pressure as we experience it in daily life. And we want to see whether there are some defenses that we can use in an effort to restore our own securities. Our first line of defense against pressure, of course, is our equivalent to the Zen garden. Where in our lives is there an area without pressure? What is there in our pattern of things which constitutes at least a temporary release from pressure? Now, in the West, we have always assumed that the change is the rest, that the individual engaged in certain activities finds peace or relaxation merely from shifting to another activity. Here in the West, we are afraid of the horrible possibility of not doing anything. We feel that we cannot rest in a state of inertia. We say that we are too active-minded, that we are too positive, that we are too drama-conscious to permit ourselves to simply fold our hands and do nothing, even for a moment. So to us, release is merely a transference of a point of interest from one pattern of excitement to another. We are afraid of this letting down circumstance. We are afraid of simply resting. In fact, we have almost no experience in resting unless we are one of that small group of extremely lazy persons who have very little respect in our society. We are either lazy in the negative sense, or we are frightfully occupied. We do not recognize or understand this release from action, this release into recuperation. Actually, if we were all as busy as we think we should be for the 24 hours of the day, none of us would live very long. So we do have one escape from all of this, the one inaction that we know, and that is sleep. Sleep is a condition which, as far as the busy man is concerned, is nature's complete waste of time. Many persons resent sleep because it interferes with activity. They grudge themselves even rest. But when fatigue comes upon them, they have no choice. Sleep, therefore, represents, in a sense, nature's pattern of correction. It is the individual achieving a complete letdown by the loss of consciousness. Having ceased to exist as a person, he finds himself unconscious but free of tension. That is, of course, unless he is carrying tension into sleep. This may happen, but still, in the large, sleep is release. Now, in this state of release, why is man released? Is it simply that it is his loss of self-awareness Probably this is the dominant factor. Having ceased to be aware of self, of the tremendous pressures of self-purpose, the individual suddenly relaxes. Zen might define it in this way, that the individual can never relax until he loses the compulsion of his own selfness. As long as he says to himself, this I must do, this I cannot escape from, this I cannot postpone, this must be achieved, or I am a failure, or I am miserable, I am poor, I am decrepit, unless I do this. While these attitudes remain, the person is under tremendous tension. So in the Zen philosophy, meditation becomes a kind of sleep. Yet it is not a sleep of unconsciousness. It is a sleep of directed adjustment with life. We can follow nature's way and depend upon complete loss of consciousness for this desperately needed letdown. Or we can develop an art in this, as Eastern mysticism has done. An art which perfects nature, anticipates its needs, and furthermore makes man a living, contributing force to his own relaxation. Instead of having his consciousness blocked by natural processes over which he has no control, he recognizes his own need, becomes in a sense the master of his own destiny, and coming to know that relaxation is important, he cultivates it. And by cultivating it, he has it when he needs it. In the Zen garden relaxation concept, therefore, the person is simply recharging the battery of life. He is recharging it, first of all, by no longer calling upon it beyond its natural capacity. One way of conserving energy is to hold on to what you have. Man cannot actually positively create energy, but he can administer the use of it. He can guard himself against the waste of it. He can use his energy allotments as wisely and as skillfully as his intelligence permits. To do this, he must be conscious of this allotment. He must become aware that his energy is one of his responsibilities. To do this, he must be conscious of it. He must administer it as he administers everything else in the life he lives. So realizing that he must conserve, he wishes to find the best possible way of preserving and conserving his energy allotments. When his body is hungry, he seeks food. When his body needs rest, he seeks sleep. His body is cold, he either finds warmth or increases his clothing. If his body is too warm, he does the reverse. He tries to adapt himself to the needs of this compound structure which he calls his body. Man's contact with life around him is largely dependent upon the processes of the nervous system. Therefore, the nervous energies must be conserved. They must be properly regulated. The mysterious group of energizers which control and direct the flow of nervous energy and nervous resource must be understood, and their process is guarded. Failure to take all of these into consideration means the gradual loss of energy supply, the waste of it, the sacrifice of it for purposes or ends that are neither useful nor essentially necessary. Tension not only demands more energy, but it wastes more energy. The tense person is using too much vital resource too rapidly. In nature, man is probably about the only creature that is consistently tense. Animals develop moments of tension, but they are not constantly tense because the animal lacks ambition. The animal does not have the long-range strategies which affect man. Animal instincts arise quickly. The animal obeys. When instinct arises in man, it is almost inevitably met with conflict. The individual, under every instinct and impulse, finds himself at conflict with himself. As a result of constant conflict, there is further depletion of energy. Man being a creature capable of tremendous intensities, it does not follow that his organism and structure is capable of maintaining a continuous pressure pattern. Man is actually a far more fragile creature than he realizes. It seems sometimes as though he is almost immortal, that his body and personality can stand intense stress over vast periods of time. At another moment, these life resources disappear so quickly and with so little apparent cause for disappearance that we wonder how fragile this personality really is. But one thing is certain: it cannot stand the pressures which Western man is imposing upon it. It can stand them for a little while, but not indefinitely. And every individual has to find a way to reduce the pressure content in his own nature. So we have to try to figure out how he can do this and still retain his place in society and meet the challenge of the conditions that arise around him. One thing that creates pressure in man is responsibility. And responsibility nearly always results from the person taking on various patterns of duties which he must protect, must fulfill, must guard with his resources over a long period of time. Thus, one of the reasons for pressure is commitments. These commitments represent responsibilities voluntarily or sometimes involuntarily assumed, but nevertheless present. And in the effort to meet these responsibilities, the person very often exceeds his own capacities. With life as it is at the present time, the planning for the future of a pattern of responsibility is extremely difficult. Duties which we may assume today as quite possible and reasonable may prove an extraordinary and incredible burden 5 years from now. Things that can be done today with a minimum of effort may be impossible of accomplishment at some future date. Thus, the assuming of long-range responsibilities requires a great deal of thoughtfulness, and responsibilities demand a certain kind of person. All persons are not suited to these responsibilities. Some can carry them with wonderful dignity. Others cannot carry. And our tendency today is to assume that the person who cannot is simply weak, is simply not standing up and doing what he should do. We measure all persons by the few who seem to achieve their ends, and all others are measured in terms of being lazy or witless or lacking in character or integrity or resource, character, or principle. The truth of the matter is, we do not all have the same resources with which to carry the burdens of life. Resources depend upon so many things, and each person, in estimating his own pattern in life, should at some time survey his resources to find out how much of a load he can really carry. If he has a very small probability in these areas, he must live within it, or else he must find ways of increasing his abilities. To drift along on the assumption that whatever we are endowed with, this is our allotment, we can do nothing more to it, other people must accept us as we are, such attitudes, usually almost total indifference to the matter, will have very little constructive effect upon the degree of responsibility or pressure that we can naturally assume. There are in this world many persons, for example, who by natural tendency, natural inclination, are suitable to parenthood. There are others who are not and will not be so suitable. They are incapable of the maturity of judgment necessary to maintain a successful home. When these persons attempt to do so, they overtax their allotment of integrated integrities. These people therefore fall apart. They cannot help it. And it is wrong to assume that this collapse is due to extraordinary weakness. It is not. It is rather due to the lack of organization or integration of resources. The person simply is not able to carry the responsibilities. A child growing up in a badly adjusted home is not going to have capacities to maintain a home of his own to the same degree that a child brought up in a well-integrated home will have these capacities. The individual of educational limitation, finding it ever more difficult to make a living at all, will not have the same ease in maintaining a household that will be experienced by the person who has an adequate education and is therefore capable of maintaining himself in an executive position. The person by nature physically healthy has a better chance of carrying responsibilities than one of delicate constitution. A person with a healthy, robust nervous system is more likely to remain optimistic, to face the situations of life with a good hope, than one who is naturally hypersensitive or shows strong neurotic tendencies. Thus, the personality, its equipment, its development, the judgment and strength by which action and thought are guided, these things determine the degree of pressure which we are going to suffer. The person who is adequate to his situations functions with less pressure. The individual who is struggling desperately to maintain a situation which may escape from him at any moment because of lack of his own resources. This person is under tremendous, terrifying pressure. Normally, man's nervous system is so constituted that it places a certain natural boundary upon pressure reflexes. The person who has only a certain degree of acceptances, who can only stand a certain amount of pressure, is usually protected by nature. For if pressure far beyond this degree develops, the person is simply unaware of it. That which cannot be experienced within the common life of the individual, he may not react to at all. And if he does not react to it, no pressure results from it. But today, the levels of life which once protected the person have been badly broken up and confused. No pressure results from it. Up to the beginning, even the first decades of the present century, life was very largely stratified. Badly broken up. Abilities caused individuals to belong to groups. In these groups, they were accepted because their abilities were about the same as the abilities of other members of the same group. Those with moderate attainments expected to live moderately. Those who had limited earning capacity did not expect to live luxuriously. The code of life, the status of living, the cost of living, these conspire together to help the person to live within a pattern of abilities. It is a pattern of abilities meant that he must maintain an establishment on a limited budget. I remember very well when a person could rent a good 5-room house on a good-sized lot without buildings for $15 a month. People lived in them and were quite happy about the whole thing. Today, even the same piece of property would rent from 8 or 10 times that. In those days, people worked hard, expected to. Therefore, the work being according to an expectancy did not produce tension, it produced fatigue. Today, we do not work to the full physical resources which we possess, but we are poorly adjusted for the most part in the things we are doing. Therefore, our endeavors produce tension and not fatigue. The average person is not physically tired. He is nervously exhausted and discovers to his amazement that nervous fatigue is the most desperate kind. Trying to estimate some of the patterns, then, in a practical way, we come finally to the realization that society today, whether it be the Great Society, or the great socialized unit that some are dreaming of, or the great communized state that most are afraid of, regardless of what this pattern may be, the truth remains that society is not protecting the individual and has no intentions of protecting the individual. Society will provide the individual with certain situations, certain conditions. Society can develop a sufficiently benign attitude so that it will prevent the individual from starving to death. It may bring to him socialized medicine. It may make more and more secure the bare necessities of his existence and even provide him with some luxuries. But society is not concerned essentially with the individual. It is concerned with a series of sociological platitudes to which the individual is variously related. Society is not interested in the individual for one definite reason: that no society as we know it today is geared to the potential of the normal person. No society has as its final end and objective that the individual will be protected against the pressures which will sicken or destroy him. Society today wishes to continue to produce these pressureful situations and then provide medicine at lower rates for those who are destroyed for the pressure. Society continues to make us sick and then gives us socialized medicine as a panacea. There is no intention to change the tempos which we regard as necessary to this mysterious, intangible thing called progress. Progress must be served, even though it must be served by the destruction of the individual. Progress produces means of destroying the individual. We must accept this. We must accept the bomb. We must accept all of the vast developments of destructive armament, simply because they are evidences of pressure and progress. Today, therefore, we cannot depend upon society providing a normal environment for the person. We cannot assume that our children will go out in a world that has been planned to be the best for those children. It is not going to supply these children with the type of environment which will conserve their emotional resources, give them calmness and peace within themselves, and assure them a moderate degree of success without the terrible competitive pressure that destroys health. What society is really producing is instruments for the advancement of its own purposes. Quite aware of the fact that these implements and instruments are going to be destroyed by society, but that they are expendable, and that there will always be a new generation of young and hopeful persons to take the place of those that are destroyed by so-called social pressure. To face the situation, then, means only that the pressure problem must be solved by the person. It will not be solved by the school system. It will not be solved by science. It will not be solved by sociology. It will not be solved by industry or politics or economics. It will not be solved by raising wages or increasing insurance premiums. It will not be solved by the multiplying of social benefits. The pressure problem is the interval between what man wants to accomplish and what man can accomplish. And this interval widens every day because his mind is capable of visualizing a kind of world that his body is not capable of building, that his strength is not capable of maintaining. So the person has to take over the administration of his own life. He must decide what he can do and what he cannot do. He must decide to the degree that he wishes to commit suicide to maintain the psychic pace of his contemporaries. He must decide to what degree he wants to be sick in order to be successful. He must try to decide what his standard of living is worth to him, what he wants to have out of life in order to be successful, what he expects to achieve in the span of years allotted to him. And he must try to free himself from these exaggerating and distorting mental, emotional processes that lure him on to a way of life that is inconsistent with every simple fact that we know to be true. If we are willing to sit down and think through our resources, then we can lay plans. We can view life as a challenge, but not as an ogre that is determined to destroy us. We can play life skillfully as a master gamester plays his game. We cannot win this chess game of life in the sense that we are going to ultimately attain victory over living. We can, however, win to the degree of having a useful, comfortable, and reasonable life while we are here. Pressures nearly always arise from unreasonable and inordinate demands on the part of the individual. His desires for things which he cannot or will not earn. And then the various disgruntlements that arise from his lack of adjustment to his own standard of demands. Putting it this way, the individual, to solve pressure, must become more in himself or demand less. There are two ways of satisfying need. One is to have more, the other is to need less. Diogenes was the master of this equation. There are two ways of today we have the right, one is to perhaps more than at any other time in history, to make demands upon life if we are willing to meet these demands by an adequate expression of personal resolve. To make demands, if we wish a certain measure of success, we have a right to strive for it. But we have no right to expect this success by bluff or subterfuge. The bluffer and the deceiver are immediately tied into terrible tension problems because they are insincere and insecure. So the person who wishes a life of rich fulfillment must plan and build according to the pattern of his own hopes, beliefs, and convictions. He must find ways to fit himself for the things that he wants to do. Years ago, I knew a young man who, by a strange fluke, was given a job, an important and critical job, in an airplane factory as a designing engineer. He had never taken a course in engineering. He had never taken a course in draftsmanship. And these were the two subjects he had to use all the time. He was a good bluffer. He was able to keep this job without anyone realizing or finding out that he did not know for nearly 10 years, simply by carefully copying the work of others, by studying a little, by asking a few judicious questions at the right moment. He was able to maintain this very difficult position, a position which paid him very well, and it demanded in him a new standard of living which he did not wish to give up. In 10 years, however, he fell apart. He could not continue the bluff any further. He was hopelessly wrecked, nervously and emotionally. And had he not stopped, and he did, would probably have ended mentally very ill. He could not keep on bluffing. The responsibility, the fear, the anxiety hanging over him all the time, for he never knew from moment to moment when some question would be asked, some situation would arise in which his bluff would be discovered. So he could not stand the strain. And to most of us, this is to a measure our problem. Well, we're not bluffing as he did. We are inadequate and we know it. We are never sure when an emergency will arise which will overwhelm our reserve and our knowledge. We are never sure when we will no longer be able to continue the courses which seem essential to us at the moment. We have to get past this, or we will never get past tensions. Because tensions, with their anxieties, with their debilitating results, arise from this inner realization that we are not secure in the things that we are doing. To meet this natural problem, we know that today experts in nearly every field are going back to school every year. The graduate engineer, graduating at the top of his class, could not pass the final examination for a class 2 years later than his own. Constant change, constant modification. The pressures increasing continuously. Everything becoming more complicated, and the individual merely becoming older and more tired. Youth, however, cannot take over either. Youth today, as research is showing, is graduating from college completely exhausted in terms of nervous resources. The average college graduate today is more psychically and nervously tired than the average man of 3 times his years in the last generation. He is already an old, worn-out person when he graduates, because too much has been demanded of him, particularly at a time of life in which his resources are not at their best for this type of pressure. The person living along through life used to believe that he could live securely and at least the probability of his own life expectancy. World conditions would not change enough in 50 or 75 years to cripple the right of the average person to survive through his span of life expectancy without impossible situations arising. Today, the whole world changes in 5 years. There are no longer securities of these probabilities. The man who masters his trade today is not certain that he will work for the rest of his natural life. He does not know when he will be replaced. He does not know when the field of endeavor with which he is concerned will become obsolete. These pressures add a constant subconscious fear which eats at the securities of this person. Yet we all live in one kind of a world. Whether we know it or not, we live in a rather pleasant world. After all, most human beings are not ferocious or terrible creatures. The tendency of nearly all normal persons of all races and nations is to be kindly, well-disposed, sincerely interested in preventing suffering and bestowing as much happiness and contentment as possible. We are not living in an awful world. We are not really living in a heartless world, because most of the people who are in trouble or are causing trouble are good-natured, kindly intentioned persons. They are all dominated by some kind of a strange, abstract pattern. And this pattern grinds all of nature into the same ultimate fatigue situation. It is not that it is a nasty, terrible life that we live. It is that we have gradually set up patterns and standards and attitudes which are commonly afflicting us all and making life a desperate and difficult cycle for hundreds of millions of human beings. And out of the pressures and difficulties and stresses of these patterns come disorientations of mind and emotion. And what we call really nasty people are mostly merely very tired, disorganized, disoriented people, nervously exhausted, and therefore incapable of normal, happy, well-adjusted function. The Zen situation takes this particular problem under consideration very definitely. And one way perhaps we can approach it is by reference to what is called the no mask. In Western psychology today, some schools have the term the persona, or the mask of the person, which he wears before society. This mask represents the individual's defense. It is the person he wants others to see. It is the person which is the product of ambition and bluff and pressure and tension. It is the successful person who wishes his photograph to be on the cover of the local handbook of the social clubs, the service clubs, organizations. It is the face of the young politician rising in the world, and of the old substantial broker the head of his corporation. It is the face of a strange, tired responsibility, which is regarded now as respectability. This mask, the no mask, is tied in very greatly with the psychology of Asia. And if you notice the various images and symbols of the deities of Hinduism and Buddhism, you will realize how often this mask appears. The no mask of Asia is the face that is inscrutably calm, the strange, quiet face, about which lingers just the suggestion of a smile. A strange, almost expressionless face. Western people, observing this expression on the face of their Eastern brethren, are inclined to assume that it is a mask, that this Oriental person is wearing this expression as having cultivated it for years in front of a mirror. That this expression is something that he puts on for a purpose, and that behind this expression is all the confusion, all the intensity, all the uncertainty of Western man. But the Eastern man has found a cute and interesting way to conceal this, and in this way, to a sense, discomfort his Western friend. Actually, this attitude is not correct. The no mask of Asia represents a cultivated internal integration. This expression represents 2,000 years or more of civilizations and cultures and ways of life that have been founded upon self-discipline. That never for a moment does the conduct of the individual escape from the pattern of that individual's conscious concept of value. In other words, this no mask has been developed through thousands of years of self-control. It is not an expression put on. It is an attitude of consciousness moving out. And the face becomes the symbol of this attitude of consciousness. Some years ago, there was an illustration, I think it was in Life magazine. A photographer had taken a picture of a crowded intersection in New York City. And in this picture, there were at least 100 clearly visible faces, sufficiently well photographed, although the persons did not know they were being photographed, so that you could study the characteristics of expression. At the time the picture was published, the caption was placed underneath it, pointing out the interesting fact that in this nearly 100 faces on the street, there was not one with a smile. 100 faces, 100 glooms of one kind or another. Every one of these faces was loaded with tension. They were all grim, locked faces, with deep furrows in the corners of the mouth, furrows that slanted downward, to give a strangely grave, sad, melancholy kind of expression. Deep-set eyes, heavily shadowed by the light, even upon the aquiline features of Western men. Faces loaded with pressure, loaded with grim resolve. Faces bitter, saddened, exasperated, relentless, but faces strangely and wonderfully filled with not an evil look, but a strangely sick look. I was talking with a Japanese friend in a little hotel in a small village about 100 miles north of Tokyo, and he was telling me about the visitors and tourists that come to the hotel. Not too many. Maybe one group every 3 or 4 weeks. The rest of the time he lives entirely with the native people. He says he begins to realize why it is that the little children cry when strangers appear. Western people frighten Eastern children, not by anything they do, because like as not they're handing out candy bars here. What, however, is that as the child will say to its parent, why does this person dislike me? Why is this Western person looking at the Eastern child as though the child had done something evil? The Western person doesn't even know it. He isn't mad at the child. Perhaps in some mysterious way he's mad at himself. He doesn't know he's doing it. But the non-Western, seeing this face, sees what appears to be antagonism of some kind. He doesn't know that this is the natural expression of Western man. He does not know that the aquiline features, the deeper set eyes, the strongly modeled face, the pressured jaw, the thin line of the mouth, these are not attitudes put on to discomfort or frighten a small child. They are the face of Western man. A face that is hurt all the time. A face that is fighting for survival against something. And behind this face is impatience, irritability, inability to let down. This face is on a person who fidgets all the time, who cannot sit still, who can scarcely read a book anymore, must turn to something if it's only the bar. This face is a face of criticism, that mysteriously is always finding something wrong with other people and other things. The face which condemns by a subtle expression that has now become part of its own nature. The individual who subtly resents the tremendous pressure of other people who are opposed to what he is trying to do. Inside, he is defending himself against that man who wants his job, that other person who wants to break his home, the children who want too much for their own good. All the different desires that bleed this person have created their scars upon his character. So these foreign people, particularly the Asiatic, with very smooth, even surfaced face, has very few depths, very few clear-cut lines of features, whose face very often reaches great age without even a wrinkle. A face which is strangely bland. This contrast is extraordinary when you begin to study it. Perhaps it is all racial type, perhaps that is the way the Eastern face is. I wonder, however, if it isn't to a certain degree associated over thousands of years with the Eastern life attitude, the attitude of facing all things with quietude, without these intensities, without these pressures with which we are so commonly familiar. One thing that is obvious from Eastern psychology is that the Eastern person has never reached that attitude that we have of demanding pity. The Easterner does not want other people to know his troubles. He does not want to have people say to him, "Poor old man, you're standing much too much." He doesn't want this. He does not want anyone else to know his sorrows or his pain or his responsibility, for the simple reason that these things are his. If he has joys, he shares them. If he has problems, he keeps them to himself. If people have problems, To advertise them is only to admit weakness. So instead of the person expounding all his grievances and expecting to be thoroughly sympathized with, the Eastern individual assumes that his grievances result from his own stupidity and they are his own private business. And he hopes that he will not impose them upon other people. This is a strange point that we find in Eastern philosophy, that it is bad enough for each individual to carry his own burdens, but it is entirely too much to burden other people with our burdens. And to do so is to indicate lack of character. There is no applause for weakness. Thus, the expression of the mask, the no mask, is one in which the person keeps his own counsels, keeps his own secrets, solves his own problems within himself the best he can, and never under any conditions feels that it is proper or right for him to demand understanding from other people. His life is not best because he is understood, but because he learns himself to understand. His philosophy has been built on this. Another interesting phase of this mask is we notice in watching Eastern people that when the face relaxes as in sleep or as in conversation, or when the individual forgets himself, the face almost always relaxes into a smile. When the person is not trying to have an attitude, is simply releasing his entire nature from the pressure of controls of all kinds. The Eastern person does not fall into a sourness. He doesn't suddenly have a sad and ancient look about him. Relaxation is not negative. It does not mean that he gradually passes into a kind of stern, sad, silent expression. The natural relaxation seems to be to smile. The smile as an expression is infinitely more used in the East than it is in the West. It overcomes practically all language barriers. But no one knows what to do about anything. A big grin indicates that everyone is doing the best he can and hoping for the best. If he can't find your luggage, he smiles. He is doing his best. I told a man in Tokyo that the Tokyo Travel Bureau put me on the wrong train. He was convulsed. He is doing his best. I told a man in Tokyo that the Tokyo Travel Bureau put me on the wrong train. He was convulsed. Has conquered something. It was not only a large wedding, but it was a thoroughly westernized wedding. The only eastern part was the wedding cake, which was in the form of a Buddhist pagoda. Has conquered something. But to get through to the wedding was quite a problem. There were hours of smiles that had to be gone through first. Smiling and bowing. They probably were averaging 600 or 700 bows an hour when I left. These bows must have been tremendous from the standpoint of reduction programs. They would undoubtedly keep a good waistline. But everyone was bowing and smiling. There was no handshaking. This was a little too conventional. But everyone met everyone else with a very solicitous consideration for age, for the patterns of life, for relationships, and everyone was bowing and smiling from ear to ear. It was a wonderful occasion. And in the East, anything that is possible to celebrate is celebrated. They have feasts and ceremonies and rituals and festivities every day of the year. Morning till night, all the time, there is something to be grateful for. They have feasts. Here we just can't find anything worth enduring. Every day of the year. Yet we have much more than they have. All the time there is something. But they have this one thing that seems to be important, and that is that little garden or that quiet place, like the shrine on the top of the department store. When you get through shopping, you'll go up and pray a little while and get your nerves put together again. Then you go back and assail the basement bargain shop again. Bargains begin and end with prayer, by which it means everyone is happy. The sumo wrestling championships were on. And as most of you know, these massive persons really represent a kind of wrestling or athletics unknown in the West. A tremendous championship bout that lasts 10 seconds. In the course of the championships, while these massive mountains of muscle were locked in what appeared to be deadly conflict, the camera of the television showed close-ups of the faces of these struggling men. Here they were locked in a to-the-death championship. And the close-up showed both of them smiling cherubically. There wasn't the slightest look of tension or animosity on them. They looked like innocent little children, smiling benignly at each other, while locked in this struggle for championship. When it was finally decided and the camera showed the winner and the loser, the smiles on both were exactly the same. There was no way of telling by the man's demeanor whether he had won or lost. They asked one of the champions about this on account of strangers present. Well, he said, we always smile. If we are smiling and have lost, we are smiling because a good man has won. If we smile and win, we are smiling because heaven has been kind to us. But there's always a reason to rejoice. Even a loss should not interfere with our being grateful that we have been good sports, we have done the best we could. That's all there is to it. This is unfathomable to Western man, who's got to put all he has behind something and come out a complete wreck. Tension in this kind of living naturally tears us very much and leaves us without too many resources against tomorrow with its new burdens. So let us at least try to gain a small lesson from perhaps our Eastern neighbors who have some rather interesting things that they can share with us. And one is to work for this childlike way of acceptances in life. A way of life in which we are not unhappy because of burdens. We have only one reason to be unhappy, and that is if burdens make us unhappy. Then there's something wrong with us. That we are not to be miserable because someone else has more than we have. That others should have more is very fortunate for them, and we should rejoice for them. It just doesn't occur to us that there is always some way of adjusting the mind so that it takes the hurt out of our own thoughts. That we are no longer desperately injuring ourselves. The moment we fall into negativity, we begin to think of unfairness. We begin to grumble that someone is more fortunate than we are, and this is an unhappy situation. But in a Buddhist country, this is not an unhappy situation. It simply indicates that the other person has earned something that we haven't earned. And we rejoice for it, and hope that his example will inspire us to earn likewise. In the West, we are jealous of him. We feel that he has no right to these things. And one of the reasons that this feeling has increased with us is because we have lost a concept of universal justice. Western man no longer believes in a universe that is controlled by a divine plan. To us, in the Western world, the universe is anybody's opportunity. And we resent the individual who steps forward and makes more of this opportunity. It never occurs to us to realize that there is a plan, and that this plan has to be obeyed, and that we have to learn to obey it. We have not any longer any faith in the integrities of things. We have no faith that our own good deeds will ever be rewarded. Therefore, we are not very much concerned in maintaining them. We believe to the moment that it's every man for himself and the devil take the hindmost. We live this way. And naturally, we are sick, tired, and miserable. In the Zen garden, we become capable of a certain quietude inside ourselves. And if we achieve this quietude, if we once experience it, if for even a few moments we actually can experience peace of soul, if the possible good that can come to us is known to us, even for a few moments, it is as though a wonderful light came through a cloud. The individual who finds this peace in himself is born into a new universe of values. He is born into a better world than he has ever known before. He suddenly discovers that the whole pattern of things is nothing but his own acceptances and his own rejection. That the mad rush of people around him cannot make him happy and cannot make him unhappy, unless he takes sides with the wrong group in some way. But actually, regardless of everything, we are all free until we become enslaved to an attitude, and then we cannot liberate ourselves again. We none of us ever have an enemy until we make one. And we never have an adversary till we acknowledge him. We are all of us creating these psychic intensities which bog us down. There is really no reason for them. We have to gain the strength, however, to live as people before we can overcome this. As long as we are afraid of public opinion, we must remain stupid in order to enjoy the high respect of others. But when we no longer care and no longer are willing to be miserable simply because it is fashionable, then we can see through these patterns into something different and better. We have a wonderful kind of life of our own. This life is always available to us. We are sculptors. We can fashion it as we will. We are master architects. We can create the structure of our own pattern of existence exactly as we will. There are only two provisos. One is that what we will must be right, must be essentially proper, or else the creation of it will cause harm, and this harm will hurt us. But assuming that the thing we want to do is reasonable and proper, we have the right to do it. And every individual has the right at any moment to give up any attitude that hurts him. If anger has worried you and injured you and disturbed you for a lifetime, there is never a moment in which you cannot renounce it. There is not a time in life when any fault or failing that we possess has to be maintained. Sometimes we may say that if we shift our point of view somewhere in the midst of life, it will upset the pattern of our ways. But most persons' patterns of ways are so bad that they can well stand upset. We will all be better for it. The fact that we have nagged for 20 years has no reason why we have to nag even once more. If we have worried ourselves and our friends and our relatives and our neighbors and our enemies into decline for the best part of a lifetime, we do not have to continue this. Even one more worry must be decided on by ourselves. The moment we refuse to maintain that which is no good, we are free from it. Tension is always associated with negations, with preserving or maintaining things that are not good. How can we look over life, even in our own small spheres of personal influence, and not be aware of the fact? How can we study our own health patterns without accepting the effect of our attitudes upon our health? How can we overlook the fact that negative or destructive attitudes always make life less attractive for us as well as for others? How can we overlook the fact that the moment we relax away from wrong attitudes, we cease to build tensions? How can we overlook the fact nature will not automatically destroy the habits we have built up? Tensions are habitual in our way of life. Our parents had them and their parents had them. The story of Western man is a story of 2,500 years of tension, with over 2,000 wars during that period of time as monuments to tension. Nature will not take this tension and wash it off, as it might clean the slate marks off of a blackboard. Nature will continue to build up habit patterns because nature is like that. Yet with every habit pattern that is wrong, nature steps in with a consequence that is painful. Thus, nature is forever reminding us that any destructive attitude we have is wrong, and we must stop it. Now, people insist that the correction of these problems is stupendous. I've heard people say, yes, that's true. I know I shouldn't be jealous of Jones, but I am. And every time I think of Jones, I'm jealous of him again. I know I shouldn't, but how do I stop? Jones has things I want. I think I'm more entitled to them than Jones is. I think Jones is a person who is too lucky. And so the person says, I have ability and Jones has the luck. So I'm jealous of Jones. Another individual says, certainly I don't like my relatives. I have good reason to. They never liked me. Why should I like them? You go to one of Jones's relatives and you say, well, why don't you like Jones? He says that you don't like him. And the relative says, did you ever live with Jones? So everybody ends up by accusing everyone else of being the cause for the discomfort. The simple matter is, it's got to break somewhere. The first individual who realizes that this liking is wrong is the one with whom rests the correction. He has to move in and make the adjustment. And usually when one person in a complex of that kind straightens himself out, all the rest of the problem falls apart. It is all being maintained by one storm center. If this relaxes, the blizzard is over.
all the rest of the problem falls.
So in all these things,
It is all being made.
the question is how to get over
by
them.
one storm center.
The Oriental mind suggests the garden again.
It is over.
Just go off somewhere by yourself and be quiet. Relax.
The question is how to get over.
Look around you and see a world
Just the garden again.
of wonders, a world
Go
of
off somewhere
miracles,
by yourself and be quiet.
a world of infinite life everywhere manifested. Listen to the song of the birds and watch the tiny creeping and crawling things upon the earth, each fulfilling their destiny for reasons that they do not understand or have never conceived.
Listen to the song of the birds and watch
Think of how you take all the rocks in the world and toss them together and you make a mountain. And when some vast volcanic strategy creates such a peak, ages to come say, how beautiful is this mountain,
together and you make a mountain.
formed out of some terror of nature, yet itself a thing of loveliness forever.
Ages to come.
Everywhere in the universe,
How beautiful is this mountain.
wisdom. Everywhere light and life. Everywhere creatures fulfilling purposes, either consciously or unconsciously.
Wisdom.
And in this quietude, in this peacefulness of things,
Everywhere
who is man
fulfilling
that thou shouldst be mindful of?
either consciously or unconsciously.
What is man in all of this, except another one of these marvelous creatures?
Who is man?
Man wasn't fashioned to conquer the world. He was fashioned to relax
Except another one
and enjoy
of these.
the wonder of creation, sharing with life
Man wasn't fashioned.
all of the splendor of life itself.
Fashioned to relax.
Man couldn't in the beginning enjoy all these things because, like the infant, he didn't understand. He did not know. He groped after some grasp or concept of existence. But now he is several millions of years tired.
He did not know.
He has lived here a long time.
After some
He has left monuments of history and literature and culture.
But now
He has lived here long enough to live better than he does. He has enough philosophy, enough insight, enough religion, enough culture and art to create a far better world for himself than he has ever built. Why doesn't he build
He
it?
has enough philosophy, enough.
Why does he go on desperately perpetuating the jungle when he is a creature who has outgrown the jungle?
Than he has ever built.
Well, perhaps it's because he's thoughtless. Because he has never actually oriented himself to life.
But he is a.
He has never really grown up to the point where he realizes that he never can own
Perhaps
anything,
it's because he's thoughtless.
that his own
Because
existence
he has
is
never
passing,
actually oriented.
that he is here for a day,
He has never really.
that he
grown
cometh
up to
forth
the
as a
point where
flower.
he realizes that he never can own anything.
Because of the pattern of his existence, every inducement is for man to live well while he's here. And by living well, it means to live richly in himself. And why should he sacrifice this possibility of a beautiful hour of contemplation for some strange distorted process, such as trying to build a corporation?
And why should he sacrifice
Why should he have this type of thing
of a beautiful hour of
when the same wisdom
for some
which he
strange
now
distorted
so strangely uses,
such as trying to build a corporation?
if it were properly used, would give him the securities he needs without the terrible tension, stress, and conflict which he has built.
So strangely
It is perfectly possible
if it
for the
were
wisdom of man
the
to
security
give him security without hate,
without the terrible tension,
to give him progress without death,
conflict which he has built.
to give him the unfoldment of his own character without conflict,
Wisdom of man,
without fear and anxiety, jealousy and envy,
to give him
and criticism and
without death,
condemnation. These things
give
are
him the
unnecessary.
unfoldment of his own
Man is a
character
better
without
thing than
conflict,
this. He has a
without
better
fear
purpose.
and anxiety,
And sitting quietly by the side
criticism and
of a
condemnation.
little waterfall in a Zen garden, watching golden carp flashing in the pool,
He has a better.
perhaps the individual can suddenly restore his citizenship in a natural existence. A natural existence which is intended to provide him with time to sit by that pool, and to learn to understand the golden carp that swim in that pool. For in the beauty of the afternoon, the flowers and the growth of natural things, come the rewards that bring with them no pain, no stress, no anxiety. The individual can have friends. He can live a simple, useful, unfolding life of inner nobility. He can write great poetry and great drama. He can compose great music. He can find countless ways to live well. Cottage industry has proven itself in Asia as a tremendous thing. Man can produce what he needs, create what is necessary to him. He does not have to hope and believe that he must sometime leave an empire behind him. If he only was thinking more of the future before him and not the empire behind him, we would get along much better. We would have the courage to protect happiness, which now we do not have. Today, happiness is the first and most expendable of all things. And for the sake of ambition or greed or a little selfishness, we are perfectly willing to sacrifice it at any moment. Today, happiness is the first. The Zen concept perhaps doesn't enable Western man to quit his job and live by the side of a pool, or experience the quiet joys of Thoreau on the shores of Walden. But the Zen concept can help Western man to adjust a little better to the place where he already is. It can help him to live in the world he is in. It can bring him a little more contentment with his job. It can give him a certain sense of value in simple and direct things. Perhaps it can help parents to be less nervous with their children, to recognize that there's something important in being good parents and not in trying to find a good babysitter. Everywhere, quiet thoughtfulness produces solution, and quiet thoughtfulness relaxes tension. Now, there are tensions that come also from vast collective circumstances of life. Now, there are tensions that are almost inevitable to man. Man has one tension which probably will be very difficult for him to overcome. And that is tension of insecurity about himself. Man is always in the presence of his own dissolution. He never knows when in a second all this pattern of life which he is struggling with will dissolve into emptiness. He never knows in what moment he will vanish away from the patterns to which he has become associated. Instead of this impermanence of himself regulating his conduct, it has become his great anxiety. Instead of adjusting to the absolute certainty of change, he builds every defense against this change and fights it to the bitter end, fully knowing that he must lose. This struggle, therefore, against the passing of himself has caused a great deal of psychic stress. It causes ambition to curdle. The individual to say to himself, I must make it in 5 years or 10 years, or it is too late. So man who was born to understand eternity becomes hopelessly tied up with a few dates on a watch which he wears. He becomes completely locked in time. He becomes the victim of the realization of his own transitoriousness, that he cannot survive. Therefore, he must hasten. But if he cannot survive, if he cannot endure, why hasten? Because all he is doing is forcing a situation which can never be permanent anyway. If the goal is such that it cannot be meaningful unless it is achieved immediately, then it is not worth achieving at all. The individual will sometime find that through the pressures of society, through the collapse of empires, through the rising tides of political and social change, man must ultimately return to the simpleness of knowing that he is here for the good that he can do. He is here for the happiness that he can share. The most important things in this world are the kindly things that we can do for each other, the gentle wisdom we can share, the pleasures of protection we can give. There's nothing in all of success that can bring to the individual as much happiness as a kindly, well-organized home. Here, where friends can work and live together in an atmosphere of affection, the members find fulfillment. Fulfillment that is greater than any success can ever bring. Yet one by one, these members of a happiness renounce their birthrights and go out in search of this strange, ethereal, insecure thing called success, giving up the real joy of existence for a pain that must eat at their souls as long as they live. What is the value of it all? What is there wrong under such condition with seeking a quietude beyond life, seeking to build within the self this peacefulness which enables the person to do all the things that need doing, but never to dramatize or emotionalize them? Zen on this is nothing but a strict and immediate honesty. Zen says to you, you do not have to like the people you do not like, but you do not need to pretend. If you have nothing in common with the individual, your lives will separate, unless someone makes false values and tries to hold together that which has no cohesive element within itself. It is not necessary to dislike anyone. It is not particularly necessary to like anyone. What is essentially necessary is to quietly accept life, accept the values of it, the immediate responsibility that comes at hand, perform it. For there is very little to it in most cases. There's the story of a Zen monk. When a community adopted a little boy who had left orphan. The child was very small when adopted. The old monk had to find all kinds of ways to feed the baby and take care of the child. And in the course of time, the child grew up. And finally, the monk had a grown man on his hands. And the child was no relative of the monk. One day, the child came to the monk and said, "Reverend Father, I realize, having now achieved maturity, how great a thing you have done. Here I am no relation of yours, yet you have loved me and cared for me and guarded me and provided for me as you would your own son, with no reward, no reason for doing so. But all I can say is that I do understand and that I am grateful." The old monk said, "I haven't done anything. I haven't done a thing. I walked along the road, and you were handed to me out of space. What is given to me is mine. And what is mine I will do my best with. When you grow up, you will go your way. I will have lost nothing because I own what is given to me is mine. It was my right, my privilege, my duty to do what I could. But this is nothing exceptional. This is only human. What else could a person do who is human?" Well, the boy didn't understand that very well, but anyway, the old monk regarded it as just simply a common task. He said if it had been a little dog with a broken leg, I would have done the same.
Well, the boy didn't understand.
Whatever it is,
But anyway,
if we have natural, kindly hearts, we do the things that need doing.
he said if it had been
And we do not sit back and rationalize them and try to determine whether they are profitable or not.
if we have natural.
And if this boy had left the old monk with a rebuke and absolutely without gratitude, the old monk would not have been in the slightest annoyed or injured or defeated. Nobody have felt misunderstood, because if he had had a little dog with a broken leg and he had set the leg, the dog had gotten well, perhaps in time the dog would have run away also. This is life. Life lives itself. Therefore, there is no debt, there is no problem. But we can dramatize these things and make them terribly important. I know persons who had done much less than the old monk and died of a broken heart because the boy didn't support them for the rest of their lives.
We can dramatize these things.
There was no gratitude in the universe. There was no fairness. I've given everything I had, and nobody cares. There's only one thing we give, and that's everything we have. And there's only one reason to give it, and that is because our heart tells us to. And when we are waiting for reward for it, we have desecrated everything. In the Zen philosophy, then, man going to work works his hours and works them faithfully. And he doesn't make more coffee breaks than he should. He isn't out to do as little as he can and get as much as he can.
Man going to work works his hours.
If he is a good Zen man, his primary consideration is that the man who employs him shall be fairly treated. And that if the man pays for a certain task, the man who does that task will perform it honorably. These are the important things, not the great question of how many hours or how many nickels. The point is an obligation. When we hire a man, we are obligated. The hirer is obligated to pay. The man hired is obligated to work. If each fulfills his obligation with a right spirit, there is no problem, no dissatisfaction, no hatred, no great conflict between capital and labor. The individuals who work from the heart, who do the things there are to do without regrets, without anxiety, these are the Zen people. They are the people who leave good things after them. And these are the same people who quickly and willingly sacrifice their own pleasure, because they have discovered that when they do, when you sacrifice your own pleasure for a greater need, you suddenly discover a greater pleasure than the one you gave up. For the greater the good that is done, the greater the pleasure in the soul of the doer. Everything is compensated within ourselves. So there is no need to fear. There is no need to worry that others will not recognize our talents. It's not important whether they do or not. The only important thing is the talent. For that alone can survive the grave. It is not important whether we are promoted or not promoted. The old monks of the Diamond Mountains of Korea, the Taoist fathers who really inspired the Zen monks of China and Korea, like to live in very remote places. Sometimes an emperor or duke or a great man would come and say to the old hermit, "Father, I need a new prime minister. My country's in a bad way. Will you come and govern us?" And the old Taoist monk says, "Well, first of all, tell me, is this an invitation or is this a job?" Well, the emperor says, "Well, I've put it that way if you want to. I guess this is a job where we really need you." The old monk says, "Well, if there is a need, I will do it."
As soon as the need is over, I will retire, because I have no interest whatever in being Prime Minister of anything.
We really need you.
Because all that a Prime Minister gets is hardening of the
There
arteries.
is a need, I will do it.
And no amount of reward can pay him for the jealousies which are heaped upon him by the ignorant. But if there is something that needs doing for the common good, it shall be done to the best of our ability. But we want no compensation, we want no honors, we want no recognition and no flattery. In order to do this thing, we must have the help of the imperial house. The Prime Minister cannot bring virtue unless the Emperor requires it. Therefore, the Emperor must set the example. The Prime Minister will administer the state, and the people will flourish. But if there's any problem here, if there is any catering to the ministers of state, if there is jealousy and bickering, then run the country yourself. You have no place in it for wise people. This was the opinion of Confucius at an earlier date. So these old monks used to come out of the mountains, run a country for a year, 2 years, 5 years, and then hasten back to their meditations and get over it. They had no interest in power. They had no interest in high office, but they recognized duty. And they realized also that regardless of what the office was, duty demanded they had to perform the action to the very best of their ability. There could be no compromise. There could be no sellout. There could be no personal advantages. The only way the wise man could live with himself was to do the best that he could at any moment and at every moment, and let the chips fall where they will. This was the Tao way. Later it became the Zen way. It was the way of cutting completely through the involved and complicated knot of circumstances. That where action is direct, where it is arising from immediate experience, where it leads to immediate experience, where the man says, this needs doing, I will do it, and does it. We then have action without tension. But if the man says, yes, I am called to this particular job, but can I afford to take it? Is the salary going to be adequate? Will I lose more friends than I make? Will my family suffer? Will my own future estate be threatened? Would I be better to do it this way or do it that way? Then the opportunity ends in a conflict of tensions, ulterior motives, self-justifications, and strategies and plots. These are the tensions. Every action that is performed has to be performed because of conviction, because of consciousness. If it is done this way, there are no hangovers. To live this way is probably not to escape all tension, but it is to reduce tension to the minimum. And we can start in with little problems that arise in our own thinking. Get rid of grudges first. There's no time. In a world in which atomic fission hangs over all of us, what sense is there feuding with our neighbors? Get over all feelings of self-pity, because they are meaningless. We can be sorry for ourselves forever, and all we will do is dissolve in our own tears. Nothing is accomplished. If we observe that certain tendencies of ours have always resulted in trouble, correct the tendencies. Correct them immediately. And realize that immediate change is the only kind that is possible. There is never a moment where an individual cannot reform himself. There is never an instant in which he cannot destroy the worst habit that he suffers from. One simple stroke of the will, and he is free of the entanglement. But if he struggles with it, it will be like a 7-headed hydra. And every head he chops off, there will be 7 more spring in its place. But by a simple yes and a simple no, But if he struggles with
the whole structure,
it'll be like a seven-headed
a
hydra.
procedure, a formality, a protocol, all these things vanish. Zen is a man of yes and no. When he says yes, he means. When he says no, he means. And both answers are unchanged. This is the end of tension. Decision ends a great part of tension. Indecision promotes it forever. The relinquishing of self, which means to get over all insults and all hurts and all griefs and all grievances, which exist because of the hypersensitivity of self. This is another wonderful aid to getting over tension. Actually, the person achieves this end by suddenly experiencing the Zen absence of self. There is no self in us that can afford to be offended. There is no self in us that can afford to brood over real or imaginary ills for one moment. Whatever is inside of ourself is energy, life. And this energy and this life have useful works to do. And all the mumbling and the grumbling is an exhaustion of energy without use. The more we compromise with these grumblings, the more tensions we develop. One of the simplest answers to all these kind of tension is for the individual to simply laugh at himself. That's where the old Zen monk was a master. The sudden, full, complete, overwhelming realization of the ridiculousness of ourselves. That if we could really see ourselves in our true and native light, we would be stranger and more ludicrous than any cartoon that an artist could devise. A bundle of contradictions tied together with a string of discords. This is man. If we can see this, if we can recognize it, if we can do like the old Zen monk carrying the broom, walking along carrying the broom so that he could sweep himself up whenever the occasion demanded. Realizing that all his likes and dislikes are part of the ridiculousness of existence. And actually, whether he likes a thing or doesn't like it is of no meaning, either to himself or anybody else. All his elaborate patterns by which he builds up defenses and finds excuses and finds means of supporting attitudes. No, this doesn't mean anything. If the attitude is any good, it'll support itself. If it is no good, nothing can support it. Forget this. Take the attitude of the garden. Sit down and become an observer of existence. And in an observer, as you see things going by that need a helping hand, give it. Never for a moment, however, allow yourself to take this strange, funny world that man has fashioned and let it seem important. It is not important. The only thing that is important about the world is the part that man did not fashion. The sunrise, the sunsets, the great motions of the ocean, the bursting forth of flowers in spring, nature bearing fruit, and in the winter covering itself with a mantle, the great motion of shimmering jewels. These things man can observe and contemplate and enjoy. The man can enjoy the nature in his fellow man and in all creatures. Men can sing together and work together, perhaps sometimes weep together. But these things are basically good. They are simple, direct things, and in them there is no tension. The tension is subterfuge, the snicker and the sneer. Tension is artificiality. Tension is the individual trying to create great broken rhythms to bear symbolism of a great broken soul within himself. Tensions are like some strange habit-forming drug
There are ways in which we try to drown the realities which we will not face. It is all actually in life a very quiet Zen mystery. A mystery of little people learning to love each other, learning to like each other in spite of their various natures and appearances, learning to excuse faults, learning to laugh together, learning to find all things that seem serious a little ridiculous, and that all things that seem ridiculous are a little serious. To build a philosophy that enables us to live graciously and exit nobly. These are the problems that Zen works with. To give the person directness. For indirectness is the end of hesitancy. And the doing of the thing that needs doing is the end of this vast build-up of psychological artificial pressures. If the thing needs doing, it needs doing. When the rain falls, it falls, because it is the way of rain. When man comes to a decision, he calls a conference and nothing is done. That is the way of man. And that is why things are in such a sorry state. Learn to be quiet a little bit in yourself and try to find ways to put yes and no's into all these maybes and perhapses which make up life. When you see situations that are wrong, try to immediately clarify it. Are you wrong? Is the situation wrong? Are you afraid to admit that you have been in fault? Have you maintained an hypocrisy until it can't be endured any longer? You say other people are thoughtless. Have you been thoughtful? Are you afraid to admit? You say other people are selfish. Are you unselfish? Face these things very directly. You say other people are thoughtful. When you face them, solve them. For if the solution comes immediately upon the recognition of the fact, if the moment we realize what is necessary, we do that which we realize, there will be no build-up. There will be no vast patterns of regrets. There will be no broken hearts lasting through the years. What is necessary is next. What is finished is finished. What is no longer creative is no longer useful. What no longer helps is no longer necessary. Everywhere, simple, firm solution. Even if we're not entirely sure, do the best we can and be prepared to stand for the consequences if we are wrong. But make simple, direct solutions. If the thing we are doing is obviously bad for us, stop doing it. If we will take these simple, direct attitudes, we will also discover, as some have found who have tried it, that our world will not fall apart, that our economic condition will not collapse, that we will not be sitting around unemployable, as we would like to think. For our tensions create more unemployable people than our convictions ever will. Actually, the moment we clarify, we have more energy for the job. The moment we learn to do things thoroughly, quietly, and immediately, without regrets, when at work our mind is on the job instead of elsewhere, things solve themselves. Things straighten out. There are fewer errors, fewer excuses necessary. Little by little, we find our lives falling into a gentle, orderly pattern. We have not lost a sense of humor. We have finally discovered it. We have learned that the real quality of humor is to laugh with life and not at people. Thus, Zen gives us a new attitude of being. And this new attitude of being marks itself on our faces with this quiet look of peaceful security. It makes it more unnatural that we smile, because we can smile when we have no secret worries and secret fears. And when all our works are done openly, when our decisions are made frankly and immediately, we carry no burden of unfinished business to disturb us. We sleep well, we eat well, we feel better, simply because our lives are in order. And in a time of tension, it is this simplification, this directness, this letting go of the dead, this making new relationships and new pacts with life itself, this getting away forever from sophistication, this recognition of simple value, and that we can never afford to violate the integrities of life. We get a few of these simple patterns down, we will not have pressures as we know them. We will not have these neurotic frustrations. We will have quiet, even living, with an opportunity to get a depth insight into life. The depth brings with it the love of beauty, the love of art, the love of culture, the love of all the fine things that make life worthwhile. Suzanne has something to offer to us even in the West. And I hope in the course of this series of talks we will be able to examine some of these offerings in greater detail. This time I think we should all give thanks that the lecture is over and go home. Examine some of these offerings in greater detail. This time I think we should all give thanks that the lecture is over and go home. Examine some of these offerings in greater detail. This time I think we should all give thanks that the lecture is over and go home.